lock your doors and use unique passwords. But what if your operating system's foundational architecture puts you on the back foot the moment you power on? This chart shows the market share for desktop computers as of July 2026. Windows runs on about 71% of machines worldwide, while all desktop Linux flavors combined account for roughly 7.5%. Think of Windows as a sprawling metropolis and Linux as a collection of specialized towns. Attackers are running a business, and attacking Windows offers the best return on investment. The sheer volume of users creates a massive attack surface, which in turn incentivizes attackers to constantly find new holes. Linux, while smaller on the desktop, is the backbone of the internet. It powers the cloud and the world's top supercomputers. This means the threat landscape for Linux isn't phishing emails. It's high-stakes espionage targeting critical infrastructure through complex kernel exploits. The type of attacks an OS faces is largely a product of its environment. Desktop Windows fights a high-volume war against commodity malware, while the Linux server world faces elite operatives targeting high-value infrastructure. Documented vulnerabilities in the Linux kernel spiked in 2025, with over 5,500 disclosed issues. This wasn't because the code got worse, but because tracking became more transparent. It proves that code written by humans will always have flaws. On the other side, having thousands of security engineers at Microsoft doesn't mean the city isn't built out of kindling. They're defending a territory whose original borders were drawn decades ago, with user convenience, not security, as the top priority. Resources don't always equal results. To find the truth, we have to look past the market share and the budgets and examine the blueprints of the operating systems themselves. Historically, Windows accounts were administrators by default, meaning every program inherited the user's total control over the system. Microsoft introduced user account control as a speed bump, but a decade of clicking yes has turned it into a meaningless ritual for many users. In the Linux philosophy, the system belongs to the root user. You get a small plot of land, your home directory, but the system denies access to anything else by default. To make a change, you must use the sudo command, a deliberate, conscious act of requesting temporary privilege. This contains the blast radius. If you run a malicious script, it can only affect your limited user area. It cannot, by default, install a rootkit or modify the core OS, because the system walls are structurally intact. Windows security evolved by adding layers on top of a permissive legacy. Linux security is structural. It assumes you have no power over the system unless you prove otherwise. On Windows, getting software often means downloading an unverified file from the web and hoping for the best. Linux uses a package manager, a logistics officer that connects to official, trusted software warehouses called repositories. The package manager checks a cryptographic signature on every piece of software. If the signature doesn't match the distributor's public key, the installation stops. This mathematically eliminates the risk of fake download buttons or tampered files. This transparency extends to the source code itself. Linus's law suggests that with enough people looking at the code, bugs become easier to find. When the Heartbleed bug was discovered in an open-source library, the public nature of the code allowed for a rapid, globally verified fix. Windows uses a closed-source model, where you must trust Microsoft's internal processes. The WannaCry attack exploited a flaw Microsoft had already patched, but because millions of users were dependent on the vendor's timeline and their own diligence in updating, the infection was catastrophic. It's a choice between two types of trust. Linux offers trust through public verification, while Windows offers trust through corporate authority. Modern Windows uses hardware to build new defenses, like virtualization-based security. It creates a secure, isolated bubble separate from the main OS to house critical services, keeping them safe even if the kernel is compromised. Linux uses mandatory access control systems to build cages around applications. A policy can dictate that a web server can only see its own files and nothing else. If an attacker breaches the server, they remain trapped inside that specific cage. Windows uses hardware to build fortresses inside its kernel, while Linux uses policy to build cages around its applications. Windows security is additive, layered on a foundation designed for user convenience. When attackers breach walls, Microsoft builds them higher. Linux security is structural, an emergent property of its multi-user heritage. User separation and signed repositories aren't added features, They're foundational pillars. Windows is like a house built in a safe neighborhood that was later retrofitted with steel doors and laser grids. Linux was built with thick walls and restricted access points as its base layer. This doesn't mean you must switch to Linux today. Windows is a robust, necessary tool for many gamers and professionals. If you stay updated and exercise vigilance, it is a secure environment. However, the architectural evidence shows that a modern Linux distribution offers a safer starting point. The system's design naturally guides the user towards secure habits by always making the easiest path the most protected one. Your behavior will always be the biggest factor in your security. What is the one practice or tool you swear by to stay safe? Share your wisdom in the comments below.